My parents gave my sister $80,000, mocked me for being broke, and said I'd end up alone. I built a $5 million empire without them. Now my sister's divorce left her homeless, and my parents are calling me evil for not letting them move in. My sister and I were raised in the same house but lived two completely different lives. My parents made it clear from early on who their favorite was. They called her their miracle baby because my mom had her late and had complications. Ever since then, she could do no wrong. If my sister wanted something, she got it. Trips, clothes, cars, money for college, money for her wedding. It never ended. When I wanted something, it became a lesson about responsibility. When she asked, it was a gift because she deserved nice things. I still remember being told I had to learn to stand on my own feet while watching her get handed a brand new car before her 18th birthday. I had to take the bus to work every morning and got laughed at for acting like a victim. The last straw for me was when my parents gave her $80,000. They said it was to set her up for life and because she actually knew how to make something of herself. I was working minimum wage at the time and living in an apartment with 2 roommates. I remember hearing about that money and just going quiet. I didn't even ask why. What was the point? I already knew how they saw me. A couple years later, I started building my own business. I didn't have help from anyone. I worked nights, skipped vacations, and lived on canned soup for months. I went from barely being able to pay rent to building something real. It took years of working nonstop, reinvesting everything, failing a few times, then trying again. It wasn't luck, it was just me getting tired of being treated like I was nothing. Now, more than 10 years later, I've done well. I own several properties, my business has grown, and I'm worth a little over $5 million. I'm proud of myself, but I also don't feel like celebrating it because it didn't fix what was broken. My family never came around. When they found out about my success, it wasn't pride, it was jealousy. My parents would still make comments about how money doesn't buy happiness and how I must be so lonely. They joked that at least my sister had a real family while I was probably buying friends. My mom once told me that men wouldn't want a woman like me because I was too independent. It used to hurt, but eventually I stopped letting it get to me. Then my sister's life fell apart. Her husband cheated on her and left her. She lost her house not long after because apparently he'd been taking out loans behind her back. I only found out when she called me crying, saying she had nowhere to go. I felt bad for her, I really did. But I also remembered every time she joined in when my parents mocked me. She always said I was just jealous or bitter. She even told her friends once that I'd never understand love because I was too focused on work. A few days after that call, my parents showed up at my house. They didn't even ask. They told me they'd be moving in for a while with my sister until she got back on her feet. They said I had more than enough space and money to help family. They tried to guilt me by saying it was my responsibility since I was the only one doing well. I told them no. I said I wasn't comfortable living with people who'd spent most of my life putting me down. I offered to pay for a short-term rental for my sister or help her find a job. But I wasn't letting all 3 of them move in and act like nothing happened. My mom started crying. My dad said I was selfish, and my sister went silent. They left without saying goodbye. So, am I wrong for refusing to let my parents and sister move in after everything they've done? Update 1. It's been a couple of weeks. My parents didn't take my no as an answer. They showed up at my house one morning like they owned the place. My dad said they just wanted to talk, but they had bags with them, so it was obvious what the plan was. They were planning to stay no matter what I said. They stood there acting like I was cruel for locking the gate. My mom kept saying it was temporary, and that family should always come first. She went on and on about how she and my dad had nowhere else to go, and how my sister was too fragile to be on her own right now. I told them I wasn't changing my mind. I reminded them about the $80,000 they gave her, and how they laughed at me when I said I couldn't afford rent years ago. That just made them angrier. My dad said money doesn't buy love and that I was proving them right about being selfish. They eventually left, but not before making sure my neighbors saw the scene. Later that day, a distant relative called to say my parents had told everyone that I kicked them out and left them homeless. Apparently, I'm now the rich daughter who turned her back on the people who sacrificed everything for her. It's funny because they didn't even pay for my school lunches half the time when I was growing up. My sister's been calling too. She says she's sorry for what happened in the past, but keeps trying to make me feel bad. She said she's broke, scared, and doesn't know where to go. I told her I'd help her find a rental, or even cover a few months if she wanted to start fresh somewhere else. But she said that wasn't good enough because she needed emotional support and family around her. What she really meant was that she wanted to live in my house without having to pay for anything. Then I found out she still had money from selling her old house. It wasn't much, but it was enough to rent something small. I asked why she hadn't done that, and she said she was trying to save it for emergencies. So apparently being homeless doesn't count as one. Word spread fast in my family. My aunt called to say I should have more compassion. She said my parents are old and my sister's life fell apart, so I should be the bigger person. I told her I've been the bigger person my whole life, and it only got me disrespected. She went quiet after that, but later texted me, saying the whole family thinks I've changed for the worse since getting rich. Meanwhile, my parents are staying with some family friend now. I heard they've been talking about me non-stop. They told people I'm too proud to remember where I came from. It's crazy because where I came from is exactly why I'm like this now. I spent years getting laughed at for being broke and independent to a fault. Now that independence is why they're trying to guilt me. My parents can't stand that I made it without them. My sister can't stand that I don't pity her. They want me to open the door so they can pretend everything's fine again. But nothing has been fine for a long time. If anything else happens, I'll post another update. Update 2. My parents have been on a campaign to make me look like the most heartless person alive. They've been calling every relative they can think of, bringing up half-truths, twisting things I said, and even trying to guilt my old friends into calling me. But the real problem started when my accountant told me someone had tried to pull up old family property records under my name. At first, I thought it might just be spam or a clerical error, but then it turned out my parents had been telling people that I owed them for using family money to start my business. That's a complete lie. I built everything on my own. Every loan, every risk, every bit of work was mine. The only thing they gave me was a hard time about how stupid it was to start a company instead of getting a stable job. It made me look into everything just to be safe. That's when I found something strange. I was going through old boxes from years ago, stuff I'd kept in a storage unit before I could afford my own house, and I found a folder with copies of old bank statements. One of them had my parents' and my sister's names listed together on an account I didn't know existed. It wasn't much now, but back then, it had close to $90,000 in it. The same time they claimed to have given my sister a gift of $80,000, that account showed a withdrawal for almost that exact amount. What got me was that it came from what used to be my grandparents' inheritance money that was supposed to be divided between me and my sister equally. So basically, they took what should have been half mine, handed it all to her, and then spent the last decade pretending it was their generosity. I never knew that until now. It made everything click, all the talk about how they had nothing left after helping her. The way they used it to guilt me anytime I mentioned fairness. It's not just favoritism anymore, it's straight up stealing. I didn't even want to confront them, but I knew I couldn't let them keep telling people that I owed them anything. So I had my lawyer send them a simple notice, nothing dramatic, just a formal letter asking them to stop spreading lies about my finances and clarifying that any future false claims could be considered defamation. I didn't post anything online. I didn't air family drama publicly. I just handled it quietly. That set them off worse than I expected. My mom left a message crying about how I was trying to ruin them legally. My dad sent an email that was half guilt trip and half insult. My sister texted me saying I should be ashamed of myself for treating my parents like enemies. It's funny how they keep calling me cruel when they've been trying to drag my name through the mud for months. Then came the part that really threw me. A distant uncle called me to tell me that my sister had been telling people I only became successful because of connections our parents helped me get. That couldn't be further from the truth. When I started out, my parents wouldn't even let me use their address for paperwork because they said they didn't want debt collectors showing up if my business failed. Every connection I made from scratch. Hearing her say that made me realize she's not just siding with them, she's helping them rewrite history. The more I looked into things, the more I realized they'd been setting up this story for a long time. Old family friends I hadn't talked to in years reached out, each with their own version of the truth. One even said my parents told them I refused to help pay for their medical expenses. I pay for my own private insurance. I've offered to help them find cheaper plans in the past, and they always refused because they didn't want to admit they needed it. The first real sign that it had gone too far was when I got a message from one of my business partners asking if I was okay. He said someone had called the office trying to verify that I hadn't abandoned my family. That's when I realized they were actually contacting people I worked with. They didn't say their names, but it was obvious it was my parents. Nobody else would do that. I called my lawyer again and showed them the messages. They advised me to keep everything documented and to prepare for possible harassment claims if it continued. It's not what I wanted. I didn't want to be in a situation where I had to defend myself against my own family, but at that point, I knew I couldn't just ignore it. Then my sister showed up at my gate one night. I hadn't seen her in months. She looked rough, like she hadn't been sleeping or eating properly. She said she had nowhere to go. She claimed our parents were falling apart because of me, and that I was the only one who could fix it. It was the same guilt trip approach, just dressed up as a plea for help. I told her I couldn't let her in. I wasn't going to start that cycle again. I found out later that after I refused, she went back to our parents and told them I had thrown her out onto the street. A few days after that, a cousin sent me screenshots from the family group chat. My parents were telling everyone I had become so cold-hearted from chasing money that I didn't care about them dying in the cold. People were reacting with sad faces and long paragraphs about how families should stick together. Not one of them asked me what really happened. It got worse. My mom apparently started telling people I had been violent toward them in the past and that I was emotionally unstable. I've never raised a hand to anyone in my life, but when people want to believe the story that makes them feel moral, they will. I started hearing from old classmates, random acquaintances, even someone who used to date my sister years ago. They all had some version of, "I heard your parents are struggling and you won't help." At this point, I had no choice but to protect myself. My lawyer sent out another notice warning them to stop defaming me. It wasn't even about money anymore. It was about peace. I had worked too hard to build a stable life, and I wasn't going to let it be destroyed because they couldn't stand losing control of the narrative. The emotional part hit harder than I expected, though. When I got home one night, I realized how quiet my life had become. No calls, no texts, nobody from the family checking in. It was like they had all quietly erased me. My sister was still living with our parents again, apparently. I heard through someone that she was trying to get back on her feet, but kept failing because she refused to work a regular job. My parents were supporting her again, even though they're supposedly broke. That told me everything I needed to know. Nothing had changed. They'd rather sink together than admit they were wrong about me. But I wasn't entirely innocent in how I handled things either. I reached a point where I was angry enough to send a message to a few relatives explaining everything. I attached copies of the inheritance documents showing how my parents had taken my share and given it to my sister years ago. I also included some of their recent messages where they lied about me. I didn't do it to embarrass them, but I wanted the truth to exist somewhere besides my head. It backfired a bit. Some relatives said they believed me, but most said it was unnecessary and that I should have kept family business private. That's when I realized no matter what I did, I'd be the bad guy. If I stayed quiet, I was cruel. If I defended myself, I was disrespectful. There was no winning. Then something unexpected happened. My aunt, who had cut contact with my parents years ago, reached out. She told me she wasn't surprised. She said my parents had done the same kind of thing when my grandparents passed, turning family against each other for money and sympathy. She told me not to waste time proving anything because people like them don't change. It was the first time in months that someone spoke to me without judgment. Even with that small bit of relief, the damage was done. My reputation took a hit. Some business people backed off for a while because they didn't want to get caught up in family drama. I had to reassure them it was under control. It made me angry that the people who spent years calling me a failure could still find ways to hurt me even now. The thing that really broke me, though, was hearing my dad had told someone I'd turned my back on blood. That's when I knew they saw me as a resource, not a son. I could hand them $1 million tomorrow and they'd still find a way to say it wasn't enough. At this point, I've stopped engaging completely. I had all calls from unknown numbers blocked. I've told my lawyer to handle any contact from their side. I've focused on keeping my company running and spending time with people who actually care about me. It's quiet, but it's peaceful. Still, part of me keeps thinking about how it got to this point. I used to wish they'd be proud of me. I wanted them to see that I wasn't a failure, that I could build something without their help. But now, even if they did apologize, I don't think I'd trust it. The damage is too deep. They made their choice a long time ago. If anything changes, I'll update again. But for now, I'm done trying to be the bigger person. Final update. After my last post, I stopped all contact with my parents completely. I blocked their numbers, emails, everything. I was tired of being the villain in a story they created just because I wouldn't give them what they wanted. They spent years calling me a failure and saying I'd end up with nothing. Then when that turned out to be wrong, they tried to act like all the money I made was owed to them. When my sister's divorce went through, she moved back in with them for a while. It didn't last long because they were already behind on rent and utilities. From what I heard, they had a few arguments that ended with her moving out again. I didn't know where she went at first, and I didn't ask. I found out later from an aunt that she was staying at a friend's house, working part-time, and trying to get into some kind of program for job training. My parents, on the other hand, kept calling relatives asking for money. They told everyone I had abandoned them and that they might end up homeless because of me. They didn't mention the $80,000 they gave my sister or the way they treated me when I needed help. They just made it sound like I turned rich and heartless overnight. I got a message from my cousin saying my parents were planning to show up at my office again. I talked to my lawyer, and we made sure that wouldn't happen. He sent a formal notice saying if they tried, it would be considered harassment. That was the last straw for me. I had spent so many years trying to earn their approval, and I finally had to accept it was never going to happen. A month later, I decided to handle things once and for all. I went through my finances and set up something that would make the problem go away permanently. I gave my lawyer instructions to set up a one-time payment for my parents and sister, each getting a fixed amount that would cover several months of rent and expenses. The payment came with a signed agreement saying they would not contact me again for money or personal matters. It wasn't a huge sum compared to what I could afford, but it was enough to make sure they wouldn't go hungry or end up on the street. My parents were furious when they got the agreement. They called me ungrateful, said I was trying to buy them off, and refused to sign it at first. My sister eventually convinced them to take it. She told them it was better than nothing. They signed, took the money, and I haven't heard from them since. It's strange because for a while, I thought I'd feel guilty or empty after doing it, but I don't. I feel calm. I did what I could without letting them drag me back into the same cycle. I gave them stability without giving them access to me. It's not forgiveness, but it's closure. Since then, I've kept my life as private as possible. I stopped talking to relatives who try to get updates about me. I learned who was really on my side and who only cared about what my parents were saying. Most people stayed out of it once the money part was settled. I did hear that my sister moved into a small apartment on her own and got a steady job. I'm glad for her. I don't hate her anymore. I just don't trust her. She apologized once through an email, saying she finally understood what I meant about our parents always playing favorites. I didn't respond. Maybe one day I will, but not now. As for my parents, they live in a small place a few towns over. My aunt said they still complain about how cold I've become and how money changed me. I think that's just how they cope. It's easier for them to pretend I turned into someone heartless than admit they pushed me away. The funny part is, I don't even think about the money anymore. I think about the years I spent trying to prove myself to people who never wanted to see me succeed. I used to believe that success would make them proud. Now I see that success just reminded them of what they lost control over. I've learned that sometimes you can't fix what's broken. You just have to stop bleeding for people who like watching you hurt. I have a quiet life now. I work, I travel, and I keep to myself. My company is doing well. I don't brag about it or post about it anywhere. I just live.